Welcome to this episode of Locked In. If you're looking for a tiny mini pump for your bike, your commuter, your road bike, gravel bike, mountain bike, stay tuned and let me tell you, I have seen this pump all over the internet. And just to let you know, the company did send me this review, but I by no means paid for it. And these are all my own thoughts. One last thing is there have been a few things that I haven't seen on other videos that I would like to discuss in this one. And let me know in the comments below if you agree. All right, so let's start off with features. This is essentially a mini compressor that's designed to inflate your bike tire, either road. I've seen it all the way up to mountain. During my testing, I tested this out on a 700 by 32C road tire and my 50C commuter tires on my e-bike as well. This does have a very small and lightweight package. It is listed at 97 grams. You can see what it weighed on my scale. And I believe that's because of the included silicone case, which they recommend keeping because it does get kind of warm. And it does help with it, especially if you throw it into a bag, it doesn't make much noise. You're not going to dig it up because this is essentially a protective layer as well for your hands and the device. This only features one indicator light on the top, which is going to basically tell you that the pump is ready to go in blue. The rough status charge in either red, yellow, or green. And it's going to have one USB-C port on the front. And that is going to be obviously how you're going to charge the device. Now, I'm going to get into my current setup, and in my final thoughts, I'll be discussing the pros and cons to this. So, essentially, since I've been commuting basically full-time for the last 2 years, I've really refined my setup, and I like to have a lot of redundancy because I don't want to get stranded, essentially, on the bike, need to get an Uber or a ride and be late to work. My old setup was usually this mini pump and a pair of CO2s matched to my 50C tires. Now, the reason why I carried both, again, for redundancy, is if I was going to work, I'd want the fast pumping action of essentially a CO2 cartridge. And if I had the time because I was ahead of schedule or I was coming home, I would bust out the hand pump if, let's say, I had a small tubeless leak and had to plug it or anything like that. And because no matter what, even if I double flatted, I had enough CO2 and I could still top off with my hand pump. This is where I think this fits in great because obviously this is battery operated, so it never runs out of air. It does run out of charge, but not out of air. Means in theory, based on my testing, which we'll get into in a minute, this is now my current setup because if this thing runs out, like the CO2s could, the hand pump comes into play. And this leads me into my testing. Now, I tested this again on 2 different tire sizes, but I have seen tests on mountain bikes, and I'll be discussing that too. With a road tire, depending on the volume, road typically now is 28 up to 32 in my eyes. You should be seeing an easy 2 to 2.5 pumps on this in my experience as you're watching this footage of my 32C Vittoria tire, depending on what PSI you want to run, if you're running tubed or tubeless. Obviously, tubeless, you can run a little lower, so you usually can get a little more out of it. Now, the big test for me was, again, my commuting setup. And because this doesn't have an indicator of the exact percentage, we're going to be talking ballpark figures here. That being said, I was able to fully deflate my rear 700C tire. And you can even see some tubeless sealant even came out. It was that flat. And I wanted to see, could this do 2 full pumps? Now, I didn't get footage of the second one, but essentially when I was done with this, it got it up to a rideable PSI, which I did by feel for the rear to the front because essentially, unless you carry a tire pressure gauge, which most don't when they're riding, that's kind of what I wanted to see real world. Could you get it to be similar? And I was able to do the same to the front. Now, obviously the front, I don't run the same PSI, but it was able to get it to a rideable PSI for both, which is typically around 40 to 50 PSI for that set of tires, depending on how much stuff I'm bringing with me. So I would comfortably say you should be able to get 2 charges unless you're running a high volume mountain tire. Most of the other reviews that I've watched, because I wasn't able to test it on my setup, this will get you about 1 to maybe 1.5 pumps. Again, depending on if you're running something as small as like a 2-inch up to a 2.5 or 2.8. So your mile is going to vary there. Now that I want to say too, this is not enough power to seat a tubeless tire. I did attempt that off camera just to see if it would work. It didn't. Again, this is not going to, in a pinch, rebead your tire. You're still going to need to use a tube. So that's going to lead me into charging. Charging this device takes about 20 minutes, give or take, I'd say 5, because again, since your battery indicator light only gives you a ballpark of percentage, you don't know if you're at 0, 5, 15, or beyond. Now, as far as charging goes, the one thing I haven't seen anyone try, at least in my experience, is can you charge this device and use it as a pump? So effectively, you could have a ton of inflation without having to stop. Now, unfortunately, no matter what button combination I did, try to see if there was a cheat code built into it, I couldn't get it to do that. It would blink red and wouldn't activate the pump. So that being said, I actually don't carry anything additional when I'm commuting because I already carried a small, thin battery bank with me at all times with a USB-C cable, an iPhone charger, and many USB cables as well because of my bike life. So I always had mobile electricity in case I was going somewhere, and I don't like carrying outlet adapters and things like that. This was a lot more convenient, especially having two USB ports on it. I could charge multiple devices. That being said, what would happen in practice, because I do work remote now, is I would utilize this if I needed to, commuting to work or in a pinch. And then, as you can see here, toss it on the charger, throw it into my rear bike bag, and let it charge itself back up. This is a 5,000 milliamp battery, if that matters to you. And if I can refind it, because I did buy this a long time ago, I'll include it in the links below. Reason why I didn't mention that in my setup is obviously if I'm not commuting, I usually don't carry a battery bank. But if I am, or I'm doing, let's say, a bike packing trip, I will bring that with me. So in theory, in another 20 minutes or so, you could have another 2 full charged pumps. And again, if you couldn't get all the way to the PSI you desired, I would have my hand pump there to get it up to pressure if needed. That leads me into price. Price for this currently is going to be $89.99, and I do have an affiliate link in the lower description, which does help out a little bit on the channel. So I would appreciate it if you're considering buying one and you liked my review that you'd buy it through there. Now, that is on the pricier side, I have to agree. But you have to remember, this is essentially infinitely going to give you air, with the obviously downside of you have to charge it periodically. But it has been a long time since I've ever double flatted on a ride. And typically, if I'm doing that long of a ride, I usually have friends with me that between all of us usually carry CO2s, hand pump, frame pump, or something like this, so we can help each other out. So I don't see that as a downside. I see it as something that does create less waste and is infinitely usable. And that's why people like hand pumps or frame pumps. So I get that side of it. The other thing to consider for the price too is if you have someone that doesn't have the strength or dexterity to either use a hand pump, or you can't ever get to the PSI that you actually need, especially at those higher PSI ranges, this would be a great option for you. And obviously it's small enough to throw in the back of a jersey, a handlebar bag, a top tube bag, frame bag, you name it. This thing would obviously fit very well. And if you're going on that kind of extensive ride, I don't think that would matter. You can see here the differences while I'm talking about this in the weight setups between it. It is not the lightest weight setup. You can see it here by itself, here with the battery pack and cable, because this is essentially what I carry with me when I'm commuting, versus a hand pump of either style, either my road or my gravel, and a CO2 setup that I would carry also with me, either with one cartridge or two, and depending on the length of the ride. I typically don't carry this on my road bike rides because the CO2 and everything fits better in my small saddlebag. But if I did have a larger saddlebag, like most riders do, I feel, you could totally sneak this in there as well and not need a jersey, because I don't always do jersey rides, even when riding my road bike. So that's going to lead me into my final thoughts. What are things that I liked and disliked? I really did like the speed of this and the convenience of it compared to using a CO2, because if you ever used one, there's some times where you don't screw it on fast enough, you don't get all the air pressure in there. It's kind of a tense moment, especially when you get a flat seat on the side of the road. So in that aspect, it is an improvement as far as user experience. Now, the pump is loud, so it is going to draw some attention if you're trying to be sneaky with it for whatever reason, but that's something that you do need to consider. I do like how fast it does charge, so it's not that big of a deal. Again, I haven't double flatted in quite a while, where if I was really worried about that, again, I'd have my battery bank. Also, I do like that it does come set up pressed out of the box. It's kind of a mixed bag if you want to change it to straighter. They do include the adapters, but it's something that if you're constantly switching, that's going to get really annoying and a lot of small parts to carry, but not a big deal for most of us cyclists, in my opinion. You're either going to run one or the other and set it up and probably never change it again. The one thing that would really improve this product and almost make it, I don't want to say perfect, but is one, having some kind of pressure indicator on it, either in a small LED strip at the top to conserve battery life, because obviously that's going to affect it, or have a Bluetooth module in there and pair it with an app that could show you realistic time of, one, your current percentage in percentages, as well as what PSI you're currently at, which would also give a side benefit of using it as a pressure indicator. So if I was, let's say, pumping up by hand, this pump also doesn't have a pressure indicator on there. But if I could simply turn that thing on, open the app, and double check it, that would give me an idea and either top it off with the CycPlus unit or finish it off with the hand pump. Because I do have to say, another thing that is something to consider is you have to be pretty hand calibrated, I'd like to say, because since there's no indicator on it, there was a lot of times where I would fill it up to where it felt almost right. I would go check the front tire And if it felt firmer, I would then continue to go. So there's a lot more back and forth because I didn't know when it was going to stop, essentially, on the more high volume tires, because in the manual, they only list road tire sizes. That would be a nice thing to know, the max PSI. They could figure that out. But again, app or LED screen would fix all that. I don't think the Bluetooth module and pulling out your phone is a big deal because most of us are going to ride with our phones on us. But a more rudimentary version with an LCD screen would be faster, but again, may affect battery life, but I don't know how much. That'd be the really only improvement, as well as I don't know if the form factor in a little bit more cylindrical or rectangular version, instead of it being so square, might fit in a jersey pocket or a saddlebag a little easier. With the overall volume being the same, I'm fine with that, but just maybe in a slightly different form factor might fit into things easier. So that being said, those are my final thoughts. Have you tried one of these pumps yourself or something similar? Please let me know in the comments below. This is something that they did win an award for, this product as well, I believe in 2023. And so it's something that is different and it does solve a problem in my opinion. So that being said, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. I'd really appreciate it if you turn that notification bell on so you can see when my next video is coming out, because we're back, baby, and I'm posting every week. So I hope you like this video, and thanks for watching another episode of Locked In.
Let's get locked in today.